I really had no idea what was going to happen next, because there was something intuitively in me that knew that there was something more that needed to be revealed within myself, and to I had this knowing that I was going to heal myself, and I didn't know how or what the next steps were going to be.
Hey guys, welcome to our SoulFam Podcast, where I interview space holders from all over the world. I'm your host, my name is Karolina, and I am the Connection Catalyst. I help spiritual entrepreneurs experience deeper connection with themselves, with others, and with the universe. Today on the show, we have Malia Eli, the woman's Ayurvedic practitioner, the Mayan Abdominal Therapist, which is really interesting, and the Self-Care Enthusiast. Welcome to the show, Malia. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you. I'm doing well. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too, especially that I've literally never ever in my life have heard of the Mayan Abdominal Therapy. So I am so curious about that and so curious about the method and what it encounters and how does it even like work that we still can use these Mayan stuff. Like it is crazy that we can still use the techniques that were present in, such ancient times, let's say. But yeah, I would love to start with a little bit of your story and your background. Like how did you decide to be the Ayurvedic practitioner and the self-care enthusiast as well, and what has led you on this path?
Yeah, absolutely. So my path actually began probably about 10 years ago. I was just turning 22. I had finished my bachelor's of science, and I was actually on the track to continue my education as a doctor. And during that time, I was experiencing a lot of issues with my health. And so the irony of it is I was seemingly healthy at that time, and I was riding my bike everywhere. I was eating really healthy, and my focus was health and exercise science. So that's really what I put my attention towards. But around that time, I was just experiencing so many health complications. And so for one, I was diagnosed with amenorrhea. And so amenorrhea, for those of you who don't know, is a lack or an absence of a menstrual cycle in a woman of reproductive age, as well as a hyperactive parathyroid. And so these both just like hit me really hard. And so around that time, I didn't have a menstrual cycle for about 2 or 3 years. And so I was seeing so many different specialists. I was seeing endocrinologists, I was seeing like women's health experts and doctors and physicians, and um, there was just no leeway into what was actually going on in my body. And what the only thing that was actually quote unquote prescribed for me was to get on hormonal birth control just so I would have a menstrual cycle, because what they were looking at is with amenorrhea, if you don't have a menstrual cycle, it can increase your risk for endometrial cancer and infertility and osteoporosis. And so that was the only thing, was one, to get on hormonal birth control, and then the second was to get my thyroid removed. And so both of these just happened simultaneously, like right after I graduated university. And I was just blown away. I just didn't understand why my body was doing this to me. I felt like I was victimized by my own body. And I just didn't quite have that support either, because there was something in me that knew that there was another way, that I didn't have to get on hormones and be on hormones the rest of my life. And one of the questions that they asked me when I was going through this, they're like, well, do you want to have kids right now? And I said, well, no. And they said, well, then we'll worry about it when that time comes. So we'll just mask up the symptoms now. And then 10 years from now, when you're in your 30s, then we'll come back around and see what we can do. And so that really hit me hard. And I didn't know what what I should do at that point. I didn't really have too much support, and I was definitely raised in a household where we were taught to trust our doctors and trust our authority, and which, I mean, not to disregard doctors at all, but it was something that I really had no idea what was going to happen next, because there was something intuitively in me that knew that there was something more that needed to be revealed within myself, and to I had this knowing that I was going to heal myself, and I didn't know how or what the next steps were going to be, but it was there. And so what ultimately ended up happening is it was probably like another 3 years of just seeing doctors, and I became so depressed. I just didn't have a support system. I was crying all the time. I was yelling at my body, and I was like, why aren't you working? Like, why am I going through all of this? And so I got to this point where I'm like, you know what? I just got to like get out of here. I got to like clear my head. And so I decided to work for 1 year and save up enough money to travel the world. So I just bought a one-way ticket overseas, and I would travel through Europe. I ended up living in Vietnam for a little bit, and then there was this pool that kept telling me to go to India. And I was like, why India? And I was a little bit nervous because I was traveling by myself. And I was like, I don't know if I could be a solo traveler, like going into India. But I kept having this pool and having this pool. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know what this is going to happen, like where this is going to take me, but I'm going to India. And so I ended up flying in there into India. I was there for about 6 months. And on my last day, I ended up stumbling across this little clinic that said Ayurveda. And so I didn't know what Ayurveda was. I was really curious though, like the name really stood out to me. So I go in, and there was a man, and he was sitting at a desk, and he kind of told me what Ayurveda was. It's this like medicine in India. And so I decided to tell him what I was going through. And so he prescribed these Ayurvedic herbs to me. I fly home the next day, which was a Monday. That Friday, I decided to take the herbs, and within 1 hour, I started my cycle.
This is crazy.
And it,
What? Are you serious?
yes. And at that point, it was probably about 5 years without a menstrual cycle.
Oh my god, this is freaking crazy. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it was so funny too, because when I was there, he's like, oh, okay, he's like, here, just take these herbs, I know exactly what's happening. And I felt very jaded. I was like, yeah, I've spent like so much money, I've seen so many doctors, like some of the highest like recognized doctors in the States, and they don't know what's going on with my body, and they're not able to bring my cycle back. And then yeah, I take those herbs, and whoop. And it was funny because I first I was like feeling like cramps, and I was feeling like, it's like, what is this that I'm feeling? Because I haven't been used to feeling that in such a long time. And I like was peeing, and I looked down the toilet, and I see like blood, and I just started crying. I did, like my body was literally shaking, and there was something that just opened up in me, and it was so clear that holy shit, this is my path. This is what I want to do. I want to heal women. And it was in that instant that it just everything tunneled in, and my life hasn't been the same since then.
Wow, I have thrills when you're talking about it. Wow, seriously, this is such a great story. Oh my God. So
Yeah.
he literally just felt what you needed, or did he just know, okay, for this is the best thing?
Yeah, and you know, it was so long ago now, because I think the first time I was in India was in 2013. So I'm trying to remember exactly what he said, but he just told me, he's like, take these herbs. And I didn't, and I was in India, and I didn't trust him, and I actually didn't buy the herbs from him directly because I didn't trust him. He's like, okay, he even told me, he's like, I feel like you don't trust me, so here are the herbs, and you find another apothecary and you buy these herbs.
That's
Which I
so
did. I was
funny.
like, yeah, I don't trust you. Yeah.
Do you now?
You're just trying to get
Do
money
you
out of
trust him
me.
now? Do you trust him now?
Yes, I very much trust him now. Yeah, it was definitely quite the. I was like, okay, lesson
That's
learned.
so funny. So
um,
funny. It's such a
yeah,
beautiful story though, and it's crazy that like things that we're trying to figure out for years, then one click and then something works. And it's very hopeful, I feel, because for me, for example, I've been struggling a little bit with this kind of tension on the left side of my head, and I've tried everything, like from like diet and shamans and healers and coaches and all these things, right? But I'm still feeling like I just haven't discovered this one thing that would just click and then it would just turn everything around. And for you, it was Ayurveda, which is freaking great. And I'm so curious to know like what kind of substances, there are. And I don't know much about Ayurveda apart from the fact that there are three doshas, and I don't even know which one I am because I'm all confused because I feel like I'm two of them. And I know there are three, which is pretty funny because everyone has three doshas, right? Everyone has some kind of portion of them, but then you have one that is the most like, I don't know, the biggest, right, in you or something, the most expressed in a way. And I would love you to maybe in a shortcut or however long you'd like, really, talk a little bit about these doshas and Ayurveda as a just as an art as well, just generally, because I haven't had people talking about Ayurveda, or at least not in detail for sure on the podcast. So I would love to touch upon it at least a little bit, because this is like another way of looking at a human. And I feel like it's such a beautiful way as well, because you can associate a lot of things and then, put it all in your head and just like, no, okay, now I'm Vata, so I'm going to do this. Now I'm, I have too much Kapha, so I'm going to do this. And then you can like balance yourself out. So could you share with us a little bit about that, about all these three doshas and how they play out in our lives, and maybe also like what characteristics do they have, how we can see that these are
Yeah.
the ones.
Yeah, so Ayurveda, for those who are completely new to it, it's a science and a medicine that derives from India, and it's about 5,000 years old. And some even say that most branches of medicine, including Chinese medicine, is derived from the foundations of Ayurveda. So it's very similar to Chinese medicine, where it's based upon five main elements, which are known as the Pancha Mahabhutas, and those are air, ether, water, fire, and earth. And so what's so beautiful about Ayurveda, it's this understanding that not only the understanding of like we being rooted in the foundation of creation, but we are the microcosm inside of the macrocosm. So we were birthed on this earth, and to we where we kind of get lost in our Western medicine mentality is that we are separate from nature. And there's even this quote that I can't remember who spoke it, but it said, disconnection from nature is disconnection from self. And so illness ultimately derives when we are disconnected from our understanding of our intimate connection to nature.
Hmm.
And so with these pancha mahabhutas, or these five elements, you can really look into the five elements outside of us as well as the five elements within us. So the first element, let's say, being earth. So earth is what holds structure, it's stability, it's heavy. And within our body, that earth manifests as bones and muscles and teeth and nails. So anything that's holding structure and form is that earth element. And then we have, which one? Let's see, water. So water is pretty understood on the outside, like we know what water is. And on the inside, water is everything that creates lubrication in the body. So cerebral spinal fluid, saliva, digestive enzymes, all of that is underwater. And then we have air. And so air is our breath and is our prana. It's also our heartbeat. It's what gives us life. And then my favorite is fire, which I feel is really interesting. So fire transforms. So if you throw something into the fire, it doesn't disappear, it just changes its form, right? So in our body, our fire is actually our digestion. And not only with our digestion of food, so we're taking food and converting it into energy, but also the digestion of experiences, which is really cool. So it's when you have an experience and it transforms into wisdom or knowledge, is also under that fire element. And then we have ether, and ether is the space that holds it all. And so for those like quantum physics nerds, we are pretty much all space. There's space within every cell, within every cavity, that's holding us all together. There's that ether element. So what ends up happening is we end up taking these five elements and then further categorizing them into what are called dosha types. So like you had said, we essentially have all the five elements within us, but it's dependent on which elements are more prevalent within the body. And so this is determined, there's two different ways to determine it. There's your Prakruti, which is your dosha type determined the moment of conception. So it's based on the energies most prevalent in your mother and father. It's based on the season that you were conceived. It's based on past karmas. It's based on Jyotish, which is astrology, Vedic astrology. And so these are like the unwavering traits. So these is like the shape of your face and the shape of your eyes and your body structure. And also there's that aspect of who you are internally too that's unwavering. You're like, okay, this is my truth. And so that's determined from conception. And then you have Vakruti, which is the changing dosha. So this is based on your lifestyle and the food you eat and your stress. And so as an Ayurvedic practitioner, that is what we look at to determine, okay, what needs to be in balance, because your Prakruti can't change. This is who you are. This is like your blueprint, so to say. But your Vakruti is all of like the changing factors within your lifestyle. So Vata dosha is the elements of air and ether. Pitta is the elements of water and fire. And earth is the elements of earth. Kapha is the elements of earth and water.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you take that foundation, it's this way of like fully understanding yourself on such a deeper level. So I'll use myself for example. In the beginning, I kind of gave away that I was living very healthy, but I was still diagnosed with all of these issues. And so I'm predominantly Vata dosha, which is air and ether. So when you think of air and ether, it's very like air and ether is very up here. It's very light. It's very ethereal. It's moving all the time. It's flowing. There's no groundedness to air and ether. It's not ground, you know? And so when I was looking at my lifestyle was incredibly ungrounded. Even though I was healthy, I was moving all the time. I was traveling all the time. I didn't have a car, so I was biking everywhere. I was also so the doshas can also be equivalent to like the foods you eat too. So vata increasing foods are those going to be really light and airy. So I was eating like lots of dried foods and crackers. And so everything that I was doing was throwing my body out of balance. And so even though I was seemingly healthy in the Western world of like, oh, she's vegan and she eats really light and she bikes everywhere, and it was incredibly imbalancing to my dosha type.
Mm.
And so you can use that, your dosha, as this beautiful blueprint to really understand who you are and what's going to bring you into balance. Because the thing is, there's no one size fits all. And in a lot of nutrition, we'll have these diet fads that never work because we're so different. Like one fad could be, oh, now we eat lots of fats. Everyone eat lots of fats, eat avocados and all the fats. And then the next day will be like, no, don't, fats are bad. And it's constantly changing because we're so uniquely different, not only in our body but our mind as well. And so it's so much to get into in such a short time. But each of the doshas also manifest into not only physically but mentally as well. So
Wow, the mental manifestation of the doshas. That's cool. Yeah, so I have a question. So you said, okay, we are in essence some kind of dosha predominantly, let's say, but then we can like balance out through our lifestyle and the amount of stress and the foods that we're eating, I guess, as well. We can kind of like direct it how our current dosha will go, right? So we have like some kind of,
yes.
let's say we have all these components and some of them are more than others. But then when we, for example, I feel like I'm also vata because I'm also traveling a lot, moving all the time. I'm super active and so on. But I feel like I have a lot of pitta in me too. But so what I understand is like, for example, if I have a partner who is like super grounded, then it does me very good, because then I feel like he is, for
Yes.
example, kapha more, and then I can be more in my vata and my pitta and so on, and just move around and be in my fire and my air and all these things. And so that the same would be okay if I eat something super grounding, that will balance me out, and I'm not gonna be overactive in the other dosha in the moment. Is that correct?
Mm, abs- yes, absolutely. So jumping into like a little, because I know I talked a bit about Vata, so I can jump a little bit into Pitta and Kapha for those who are really new to Ayurveda. So mentally, so kind of jumping into vata real quick. So mentally, because of the air and ether, these individuals tend to be more like you said, like ungrounded, but also very creative and constantly inspired, and love to start new things, and love to put their energy in a million different things because they're that air and ether. And then we have Pitta dosha. So Pitta is going to be more of that fiery element. And so mentally, they're very determined individuals, and they're very timely, and these are the people that you see as like the CEOs and like the entrepreneurs and things that like really get stuff done. But imbalance, they can deal with like a lot of anger and frustration and irritability. And then we have Kapha, which is that earth and water element, which is very grounding, like you had said. And so these individuals are very compassionate. They tend to talk slower and are very present with you. But in an imbalanced state, there can be this detachment. So it's hard for them to detach. And like depression also, because they have so much more of that heavier quality, they get really lethargic.
Mm.
And so yeah, so each of these doshas, so like you had said, finding a partner too, even who expresses these opposite qualities, can really balance out your dosha type. Because my partner as well, he's pitta kapha, and I'm vata pitta, so we're able to like really balance each other out. And then also, yeah, with the foods you eat, so for vatas, you really want to eat lots of like grounding, nourishing foods. Whereas kaphas, you can eat the really light foods, the light and dry foods, because they're already very heavy. And then pittas, you want to have cooling foods like cucumbers and zucchinis and summer squash and things of that nature to help balance out your dosha. So food is definitely like the number one way to balance out your dosha.
That's cool. So I have a question because you said that it's mental dosha, right? So I believe that we can in our mental space, because I'm a, let's say, subconscious reprogrammer. Let's say I know how to reprogram people's minds, right? So on a mental level, I feel like, okay, even if someone is let's say more in this heavy energy of maybe going more into the darkness and being lethargic and melancholic and all these things, like you can
Mhm.
actually, through mental work, through emotional release, through childhood trauma healing and so on, you can shift how you perceive stuff, so the emotional, let's say, heaviness can be transformed. So do you feel like this mental image of a dosha is something that we can as well shift, or is it something, and it's kind of also for, you can have some general one and then for here and now, because sometimes I feel like in here and now it also changes, right? How you, if you're balanced or imbalanced, or which dosha are you expressing in the moment. But mentally, do you feel like it's something that we have in essence as our qualities, or is it something that through the belief work or subconscious reprogramming or inner child healing or all these things that we can do on our mental body, we can actually shift the way that we are expressing these doshas?
Yes, that's such a great question. And it's both. Absolutely. And I think with something with like Ayurveda, and when you go into like the breath work and the healing, so I always like to take a step back and just to like remind people that this this is your truest essence. That the second that you bring awareness into it, like that's all you need, is to just bring awareness into, oh, okay, this is my body type, or this is where I'm holding space mentally, then it begins to transform. Because, like, along with like Ayurveda, we are part of nature. We're not, once we start to bring this awareness in, we are going to start to crave the things that bring us into balance. And we're wanting to start to work on the things that bring us into balance because that's what feels good to us. You just take a moment, because we're so much in our head all the time, and we're always trying to make excuses. And really, the second that you just take a moment and drop into your body, that's when things begin to align, and that's when you can really heal yourself and to transform yourself. And like you said, so breath work, healing inner child wounds, all of that for sure comes into a play. But the simplest thing that you can do is take that moment and just drop into your body, and choose to drop into your body again and again and again, because this is where life happens. Life doesn't happen in the past, life doesn't happen in the future. It's right here all the time. And so even though it can, especially when we go down into this healing work, it can be very overwhelming. And you can absolutely use breath work and stuff to balance out your mental state. And in Ayurveda, we actually do that. We recommend different meditations and pranayama and yoga, but it doesn't have to be so complicated. And even if you just take 5 minutes to be like, okay, I'm just going to move in my body. Because for me, it's hard for me to just sit in meditation. It's too masculine, it's too linear for me to just sit there and be quiet. And so I love to drop into the feminine energy of being in my body, where I move and I sway my hips and I feel my body, and that's really where that healing takes place.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that because sometimes we can be so caught up in the ways to do things, and this is how we are, this is what we need to do. But in truth, if we just freaking connect to our bodies will tell us everything we need, but we just don't. And it's like, what the hell? Why did we lose it? And when did we lose it? And how the hell did it happen that we lost it? I can really relate to that because I've been on the healing journey of my digestive system, and now I feel quite healthy and it's all good. But it took me maybe like 1.5 or 2 years to really bring my body into balance. And I've tried a lot of things, and emotional healing was one of the main things, but also some detoxing and, taking probiotics and all these things. And I feel like, yeah, my body always knew what to do if I actually stopped and asked it, like, do you want to eat this? No. Do you want to eat this? Yes. And I always felt this kind of pull or push. And so if we can really reconnect to our truth, our wisdom of our body, we can just really feel and sense what is good for us. We don't need to even look at any books, anywhere. But I guess it's helpful when you maybe don't know, and when you know your type, you know your dosha, and you can be like, okay, I can really feel that I don't have enough of this or that, and then choose consciously the foods and everything that can bring you into balance. So that's so beautiful. I really love Ayurvedic practices. I mean, my friend has been studying it for a little bit, and she was like meditating with, for example, ginger beneath her tongue for like an hour to just like feel the energy of the plant or something. So she was really explaining how amazing it was. So I touched a little bit upon that, but I feel like it's something that I would really love to dive even more into, because there is so much you can learn about yourself when you explore this deeper and deeper. So thank you so much for explaining. It's really, really cool. And I didn't know you can look at it like body versus a mental body versus, other things like stable and changing. This is really, really fascinating. So thank you for that. But I really would like to know, what is this Mayan abdominal therapy? Because I'm so curious about it since we started the conversation. So could you explain like what kind of therapy is this, and how does it work that we now use Mayan techniques? Like how was it even, like I don't know, recovered, or maybe not recovered. Maybe people have been using it from Mayan times until now. But that's freaking cool. I'm so curious.
Yeah, so that was definitely discovering Mayan abdominal therapy was definitely part of my journey. So, though, and I'm going to take a step back quickly and it'll all tie in with the Maya therapy. So, when I started my cycle, that was the only cycle that I had until I decided to go back to India. But through in that time, there was, I was inquiring so much about Ayurveda, and I got very heady with it of like, okay, what can I learn? What were these herbs that were prescribed to me? And so I decided to also take all these different avenues into women's health, because after I had my first cycle, I was like, yep, there it is. There was no looking any other way. It was so clear to me. And so I trained to become a doula. I held Red 10 events. I became an herbalist in women's health. And so I end up stumbling upon Mayan abdominal therapy. And this is really what brought Ayurveda and really truly my healing myself into fruition. Because, like I had talked about earlier, it's going back into the body. And so, what I noticed, even though I was doing Ayurveda and studying all of this stuff, it still wasn't bringing back my cycle. And there was like this disconnect. And it was changing my language around my womb and around my body. And so it was during this Red 10 event where I had first learned about Mayan abdominal therapy. And first we tuned into our wombs, which was the first time I've ever done that. Even though I was dealing with not having a cycle, I was trying to think of like, okay, what are all of these external things that are going to bring back my cycle, um and all the herbs and all this stuff, but it wasn't, there was that, still that disconnect of actually tuning into her. And so when I was sitting in this red tent, it brought up a lot for me because, for one, I was with women who are all bleeding and I wasn't bleeding. And so during this journey, I questioned a lot about being feminine and being a woman, because we relate so much of being a woman to like having her cycle and to be able to have children and all of this sorts. And so I was just sitting with that, and I remember taking this moment to just listen to my womb or to connect, and I didn't feel anything. Nothing. And I was like, okay, like, do I even have a uterus? Like, I literally didn't feel anything. And then I decided to like still sit with her, and this not feeling anything, I realized was just a numbness that was there. And so I continued to sit, and this numbness started moving through these emotions, where it was numbness and then there was this anger that I was feeling. And I kept hearing all of my internal talk when I was going through this long time of not having a cycle, of really yelling at my body and really yelling at her and being like, "Why aren't you working? You're supposed to work. Why are you doing this to me?" And so there's all of this anger that came through, and then the anger came through in grieving. And so there was just this deep, deep grieving with her, and sadness. And then once I had moved through that, I really felt her, and I felt this compassion for her and for my womb. And so I ended up moving through all of these emotions, and then I placed my hands on her, and the woman who was facilitating this red tent event, she's like, "Okay, now we're going to do Mayan Abdominal Therapy." And I was like, "Wait, what is this?" And so pretty much what Mayan Abdominal Therapy is, it's massaging the uterus back into its correct positioning. And so there's the energetics behind it. So we always implement it first with bringing full awareness into your womb. Always. We always start with that. And then we bring the touch into it. And so not only are we increasing blood flow to that area, but we're energetically bringing presence and removing the uterus. And so why this is important, and what women most women don't understand, is that our uterus is held by these ligaments, the most common being like the round and the broad ligaments. And what happens through our lifetime is they're pretty loose ligaments, because they're meant to stretch and expand when we have a child. And so these ligaments that are holding the uterus, since they're pretty loose, the uterus can shift around in the pelvic bowl quite easily. And so this can be due to running. So if a woman is an avid runner, um, if she does a lot of jarring exercises like jump rope or skiing, or anything of that nature, if she's lifting anything heavy on her menstrual cycle, because your uterus actually goes from 4 ounces to 8 ounces on your menstrual cycle. So it literally doubles in size. And so my teacher, she told me once when I was training under her, that she's like, "You see that woman who was running on the sidewalk with her ponytail swinging back and forth? She's like, that's your uterus." And so what's happening is that the uterus ends up shifting position and can cause a lot, not only hormonal imbalances, but physical imbalances too around your menstrual cycle. So women who deal with a lot of menstrual cramps, constipation, diarrhea, anything like that, it could be due to the positioning of the uterus. It could be retroflex, so pushing back on the colon. Um, so so I studied to, after this whole like red tent and I massaged my womb, I decided to become an Arvigo Maya abdominal therapist. And so this actually derived in Yucatan and Belize area from a Mayan healer named Don Elegio Panti. And so he was a Mayan healer within Belize, And this woman named Rosita Arvigo, she opened up this little herbalist shop in this area where Donna Panti lived, but she didn't consider the humidity, so all of her herbs were starting to rot down there. And so she's like, I don't know what to do. And so Donna Panti, he like came into her shop one day, and he was just talking to her, and he ended up leaving, and a woman's like, that's the healer, that's a Mayan healer. And so she wanted to study under him and like study like the local herbs, because her herbs were obviously not working down there, and to like study the land. And so she followed him around, I guess, for like a year or so, but he didn't want to pass his teachings on, because it was very important to him to pass it on to another Mayan descent. And so since she was not Mayan, he did not want to share these teachings with her. But then he had a dream one night where he dreamt of passing his teachings on to Rosita Arvigo. And so this included not only the herbal remedies, like the rainforest herbal remedies, but the technique of Mayan abdominal therapy. So she ended up taking on this technique, apprenticing under him, and she ended up bringing this back into the States. And yeah, so it's still a pretty small community. There's not too many professional care therapists out there, but it's such a beautiful way to tap into not only the energy or the physical aspects of your womb and your uterus, but the energetics. And so that was the missing link to my healing. And so with that in Ayurveda, I ended up bringing back my cycle fully, and I've had it every single month since, gosh, I think 2017. It always comes on the new moon, which is funny because I was also born on the new moon. So there's just like so many beautiful synchronicities with it. And yeah, for those who haven't heard of it, I definitely highly recommend checking it out, because it's also a beautiful practice.
Wow, that sounds amazing. So, Mayan abdominal therapy, that's so cool. And it's always about dreams, right? It's always like the people's minds are like, no, 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 I'm not going to share this. I'm not going to do this. And then bang, you have a dream and you have no choice because your soul tells you to do this. And then you just go for it.
Yep.
I love this story. I love it how it played
Yeah.
out.
He's like, she gets the teachings,
That's so
which I'm
awesome.
very fortunate for.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a beautiful
so
practice.
good. And so do you feel like this kind of when your uterus like shifts, are you able to reshift it like with this therapy? Are you able to move it back to where it's supposed to be?
Yes, absolutely. So that's what this massage does, is it puts the uterus back into its correct positioning. And so women who have had lots of menstrual symptoms actually have had it completely resolved through this Maya therapy. And also, I mean, it just goes so far beyond like even just you and your body, because women hold so much in their wombs, and that's where I really incorporate womb wisdom within my healings, because we're not only healing ourselves when we're bringing awareness to our wombs, but we're healing all of the women who came before us. And so there's this whole ancestral thread of women who are within our womb. And so when we're doing this work, and a lot, I mean, I've gone through so many crazy experiences while I'm doing womb work, where I'll be holding on to something and I'll just sit and I'll do this Maya therapy. And I realize I'm like, wow, that shit's not mine. Like, that's definitely like my mother's, or that's definitely my grandmother's. Like, I'll see them come through while I'm doing this therapy. And so you're allowing it to bring notice of that and recognizing what's yours and what's not yours. And then you're able to transform that back into like, okay, this is my space, this is my womb. And so you're healing all of the women who've come before you, and then also all the women who come after you, because they don't need to hold on to what's not theirs anymore. They can, they start this new life and with their own beautiful bodies. So it's such a potent
That
practice.
sounds freaking amazing. I would love to try it one day. And I know we
Hmm.
gotta finish soon, but I have two
Hmm.
quick questions. One, because I
Hmm.
know that in your Insta handle you write that you're redefining radiance, and so I'm curious to know what does radiance mean for you specifically.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question. So, radiance for me is the full expression and embodiment of your truest self. And so there's nothing that, when you meet someone who is just like in their body, their energy is magnetizing. Like you want to be around them. There's this confidence about them, and there's this like alluring quality. And so every single woman has access to this. And what womb wisdom and all of my work portrays is to bring women back into their bodies and to enliven this inner radiance, and to yeah, and to be able to expand that light outwards. And so everything that we have gone through, I mean, with let me take a step back. So like with external radiance, especially in our Western world, it's something that we're constantly chasing. And especially for women, it's so hard. We've been put so much on ourselves to constantly chase this radiance, of constantly chasing this internal beauty, or that, or external beauty, and to just be desirable all the time. And so there's just such a high standard that we've put on women. And so that nothing external is going to bring you back into your truest self and to your truest beauty. And so that's what I love to remind women all the time when I work with them. It's in here. It's through your embodiment practices where you fully understand yourself and your inner radiance, that's going to reflect outwards, and it's going to impact the world. When women come into their own confidence and their own understanding of their truest beauty and their truest nature, then everyone is affected. And it's yeah, it's just magnetizing.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I completely agree that the pure radiance comes from within, not from without. So that's so, so spot on. So, one last quick question. Where could people find you if they really vibe with you, they would like to do some healing with you, and they are curious about your content?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is wildwombayurveda.com. So my business is Wild Womb Ayurveda. So you can find me on there. I also have an Instagram page at I am Malia Eli. And then also too, for those who are more curious in diving into womb wisdom, I am hosting this 4-week offering where we're breaking down each phase of the monthly cycle into embodiment practices. So the first phase being the menstrual cycle, and then we have the follicular, ovulation, and luteal. So we're taking each of these phases, and I know we didn't talk about it too much here, but what we're doing is we're taking each of these phases and fully going in and understanding what it is to fully embody that phase within your body, and to understand your superpowers within the menstrual phase, within the luteal phase. And we're also tying in a goddess too with each of these phases. So if you're interested in that, it's called the Womb Portal, and it starts April 30th. And yeah, so I would, if you're wanting to really dive into womb wisdom and to begin to sync with your cycles as well, check out my website. You can find Womb Portal under there. And yeah, that's it.
Well, I can feel your passion to all of that you're saying and you're expressing, and I love it. I'm so grateful that you are on the podcast with us and you're sharing your wisdom and your womb wisdom as well with
Yes.
us. Thank you so, so much. It's been a beautiful conversation. It's a
Thank
pity we don't have
you.
more time because I have so many questions more,
Yeah.
but it's been a pleasure to share this space with you. So, thank you so, so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. And I hope that you really got a lot out of it because I did. And I'm so looking forward to diving even more into my womb wisdom right now. And if you'd like to find me, I am the Connection Catalyst on Instagram. So thank you so much again for listening and stay tuned to the next episode.